Okay, we're not going to use, and this is what I've been coming across in the school setting, revenge, control. And I'm just like, can you show me the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis where that has been proven and there's research behind that? Because there's a lot of research between those 4 functions. But I'm trying, I'm looking. Maybe it is there, I just haven't come across it. And I read a lot of behavioral research. So this is just a quick example of what an ABC analysis would look like if you're doing it. And you can do it pretty quickly. You don't need a fancy, like one of the things that I do when I'm teaching students that are studying or working towards acquiring their BCBA or BCABA credential or even their RBT credential is I tell them one of the best things about behavior analysis, you don't need anything fancy. I don't use fancy technology. I don't use iPads to do all I need is a sheet of paper and a pencil. You can do an ABC data analysis with a sheet of paper and a pencil. Someone starts engaging in problem behavior, that's exactly what I'm like, ooh, let me just go over here, take some notes, get my paper, my pencil, and I just start. And this is how you do it, right? You gotta get into the antecedent. Just figure out what's there, right? Find the behavior. We use operational definitions. We won't ever, very rarely see us use terms like frustrated, sad, angry, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the other ones because I don't really use them. It's very hard to define those terms because what does it look like? There's no way we can see what it looks like. And the way that I would describe even happy, right, is going to be different than the way you would describe happy. We're not going to all define happy in the same way, but we can all define screams, right, a touch to a peer. If I have more room there, even on my little sheet of paper, I may even say, like, is he brushing his elbow against the other peer? Is he using an open hand to make contact with the other peer? Is it an extended amount of physical contact with that peer, like 1 to 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds? I'm going to get very narrow when I start defining what it is that he engages in. One of the things that I tell people, again, too, when I'm training them, when we start describing problem or just behaviors in general, because we can even describe positive behaviors, you need to be like a sports analyst. You'll see that even one of the things I like when I get little bits, like my dad has since passed, but one of the things, this is before, like when, Spurs were on the TV often, and my parents were like really conservative financially, so we didn't have cable. So my dad and we used to listen to the Spurs games on the radio. But one of the things that I liked about it is they never gave you those general terms, right? They would always specify, he's approaching the center court. Uh-oh, it looks like he's hesitating. He's about to pass. He's going to make a pass. Oh, now he's just passed it to, right? You knew exactly what they were saying when they were describing all the plays in the game. It didn't say like, oh, he's showing signs of nervousness. They described his behavior objectively, operationally, so that the listening party they understood what that meant, right? And that's what, when we define problem behaviors for individuals, it's the same way. You're objective. We're not putting in those subjective terms like frustrated, oh, my other favorite one I come across, anxious, now there can be situations that come up for an individual that, for me, I would say probably they don't have enough of the skill set to navigate through those kinds of situations. I guess that's where maybe that anxious description might come in. But typically I'm going to look at, okay, well, what are those situations, and compare that to another in which that person doesn't engage in those type of behaviors. So when we are looking at assessing the problem behavior, we have to identify the function. We can't do anything until we figure out why they're engaging in that problem behavior. Even more simply is, what is he gaining? He's winning, he or she is winning at something, and they're getting it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be engaging and defaulting to the problem behavior. One of the things, again, that I try to, even just as an analogy, I try to give to people when it comes to assessing problem behavior, and again, the school system, they're really good at like throwing all of these interventions at a problem behavior. And I'm like, ooh, we don't have time for that. I want to narrow it down as best as I can. And I'm going to give the 1 or 2, maybe 3 interventions that are going to hone in on that problem behavior. And I'm not going to overwhelm staff with giving them 15, 20 different interventions, and especially like this ad hoc approach of just do all this. Because for us, would you ever go to a doctor with an ailment, a physical ailment, and let him do that to you with prescriptions? No. You would never do that. Same for us. We don't have the time, let alone the resources, to just guess and a trial of error with 15 or 20 interventions to take and hope that one of them will work. No, I want that problem behavior to come down as fast as possible. I want to start teaching him the replacement behaviors so that we can get him, because his problem behaviors are also affecting the quality of his life, not just in the school setting, but in multiple environments. I'm going to narrow it down as much as I can to get it right as quickly as I can for his benefit, but for everybody else too. We can't get anywhere until we get that function. So is that, hopefully you guys, and I take a very strong, because I see that a lot, and I'm overwhelmed sometimes. I'm like, who can employ all those interventions at one time? That is insane. And the person who does check off on all that, I sometimes want to be like, can you model for me how you do all that? I mean, I'm just a behavior analyst, but I'd like to see and do a fidelity check with you to see how you implement all those interventions, because that's a lot. So we look at, I know, right? But those are my little thought bubbles that I have when I see that. And because I really try, that's why I say practical interventions, because I have worked in multiple environments, right? You can't do that to group home staff. When they've got 8 individuals with special needs in their care, and one of them is engaging in problem behavior. So not only do they have to attend to that individual who's engaging in problem behavior, but the 7 others, and they're by themselves. How accepting do you think that they're going to be if I completed a functional behavioral assessment on that consumer or that client, and I give that to the group home staff? These are the 15 or 20 interventions you need to employ so that you can get that problem behavior under control. They've got to feed those other consumers. They've got to administer medications. They've got to, some of them require changes. How practical is that? And for me, I say that's not very sensitive on your part if you didn't take into account those factors. You can still come up with and develop practical interventions, because also one of the biggest things too is you need to also be responsible for training them. We don't just give them the FBA and say, here you go. Some people have never even heard of differential reinforcement. What does that even look like? How do you do that? Oh, but you can only do that in a clinic, and of course there I am. No. You can do it in a group of 8. You can do it in a group of 10. Right? So that's another big thing there. So common antecedents to challenging behaviors. So I talked about this already, right? Being told no, being asked to wait, transitions from high preferred activities or locations to low preferred, right? Activities or locations, task demands, low or divided levels of attention, unstructured periods, right? These are those like what, and I know teachers, they need it for themselves too. They have staff need it for themselves too, right? I can't constantly be initiating and providing those structured activities, right? Well, one of the things that I've noticed too when I've done some of my assessments with individuals is that downtime can bring on the challenging behavior, right? And again, I'm like, I try to teach the people that I'm with, whether they're the teachers, day hab staff, or group home staff, why do you think that is? What's the skill deficit? And just take some guesses, right? Why do you think that there's problem behaviors during free time or unstructured time? What would be the skill deficit that's paired to that?
Social and perhaps executive functions, problems with being able to start figuring out their own interests and how to use their time.
Bingo, right? So for us, do they have leisure skills? Right? And my thing is like, and sometimes I'll get the, what? I'm like, ooh, looks like we need to do an assessment on just leisure skills. Do they know how to independently initiate engagement with leisure skills, right? Because we know That's not realistic, that someone is always going to provide them structured activities, learning activities, right? They have to also be taught how to manage themselves during downtime, right? And so that's huge. And again, too, I get, those looks like I'm like, yeah, that's very important. Wouldn't you like this person to learn, increase their repertoire for leisure skills? Again, and I'm like, and who's responsible for teaching that if they have a very low skill deficit, if there's a significant deficit with that? Us. So lots of teaching, right? So, and as we know too, spontaneous events can bring on problem behaviors, provocations from peers. That's tough. That's really tough. Even healthy children without, the challenges of a mental disorder or behavioral disorders or a developmental disability, that's really tough. So common reinforcers to challenging behaviors, okay, this is the us, and I'm guilty too. If after engaging in the problem behavior, the person succeeds in the termination or delay of the assignment. And that's what I hear a lot, right? Teachers will say, oh, he needs a break after he's just pulled her hair and they remove the task. I'm like, oh, cha-ching. That kid just learned, if I pull your hair, you're going to remove task demands from here. After engaging in problem behavior, the person succeeds in gaining increased levels of individualized lectures. I see that a lot in the school setting. Lots of this. And I'm like, I just walk by sometimes and I'm like, wow, that's high levels of what we call high quality levels of attention. And look, she just went from a setting in a ratio of where she was 10 to 1, now she is 1 to 1. Just for cursing you out, you've asked her to step out into the hallway and you've now been with her for the last 10 minutes, talking, giving her, and not realizing, but I'm like, I'm like, cha-ching. She's just acquiring value to maintain the strength of that problem behavior. After engaging in problem behavior, the person succeeds in gaining access to the preferred items. Oh, I see that in the grocery store, right? It's a tangible function all the time. And it's not with coincidence that those candies and little toys and gadgets are right there at the cashier station. That louder the child screams, what does the parent do? Inserts a variable, that preferred stimulus, right, that they've been crying for, so that crying and tantruming can stop. And again, I'll see that, oh, cha-ching, cha-ching. And of course, the mom or the parent or the caretaker is like, oh, this is embarrassing, right? Everybody's looking at me. The cashier's looking annoyed. People are huffing behind me. So she also engages in reinforcement too, escape, right? I'm going to terminate that problem behavior, and I'm just going to go ahead and give in. Here, take the toy. I'll just pay for it. Function of the behavior always precedes the behavior intervention. If we don't have that, we can't do anything. We're just going to be guessing and doing trial and error. For me, I don't know, but I'm usually on the floor. I don't want my hair getting pulled more than necessary. So I'm going to work very hard at, when I'm working with that individual, I'm going to get your number. I'm going to find out what your function is, what those antecedent conditions are that bring on this problem behavior. I'm also going to start assessing for how people are responding to you when you engage in that problem behavior so that we can respond differently, but also to provide the supports that you need in the antecedent conditions that bring on this problem behavior. So the behavior intervention. So now we're getting into how are we going to intervene, right? We're going to develop a comprehensive behavior intervention plan. There's 3 parts, right? You have your antecedent interventions, and again, these are those supports, right? This is where we are going to apply our efforts to help them succeed so that they're successful, but that we're all winning, right? Not just the individual, but so that we are too. So one of the things that I tell the staff that I work with is that it's not only, I mean, of course, ultimately it's improving the quality of his or her life, but it improves the quality of our life too, our work, environment. But also too, it helps enhance our relationship with that person. Because it is sometimes it is difficult to work with someone who's engaging in a lot of problem behaviors. And especially those that are, showing you the severe physical aggression, the severe property disruption. So it's challenging and it takes a toll. We're going to look at replacement behavior, right? Because for us, when we're identifying those problem behaviors, right away, I'm going to start attaching that to what are the skill deficits that correspond to that, right? And usually it's going to line up with what the replacement behaviors are going to be. And then there's the consequence strategies, right? These are where we're going to get into the behavior reduction altering responses to strengthen the new behavior and weaken the problem behavior. So you're going to be applying strategies to both with the skill acquisition process for those alternative behaviors that we're going to be teaching to, but then you're going to be applying a different set of strategies for the occurrences of those problem behaviors as they are taking place in the environment. So the antecedent interventions, they're going to focus on the events that immediately precede problematic academic or behavioral performance. Here are some benefits to the antecedent interventions. It prevents the problematic behavior from occurring, or at least it minimizes it too. Because sometimes for some individuals, like if I get an individual that comes to me and he's 16 years old and he engages in severe problem behavior, for me, I'm looking at too, like, and I will preface when, the staff that I'm talking to or the parents, there's a long established history of this behavior in which it's been very effective for this individual. So extinguishing it completely, probably not likely, and especially if he continues to contact reinforcement with his problem behavior in other environments outside of here. So what I try to tell them is like, we can at least minimize or see, we're going to work towards decreasing the occurrences that are in which they're occurring so that they're not occurring as often as they are now. Because especially with older individuals, like if they're, again, if I'm getting a client that's 25, 32, pretty unlikely that we're going to get that problem behavior extinguished, right? It's the ability to correct an aspect in the environment that is contributing to the problem behavior. Enhances the learning environment is positive, orderly, predictable, and motivating. So my sweetheart, I'll reference here. For example, so I learned pretty quickly task demands or escape function was really big for him for his problem behavior. And so I started looking at, okay, let's start looking at these antecedent events that are taking place before the occurrence of the problem behavior. So the teacher, I'd go in and observe the teacher and how she presented the task. And it was a lot. I mean, she would, she'd have her book and the textbook, and she would present everything that he needed to do. She's like, you need to do all of this as soon as you're done with that, and this, and this. And so one of the first things I told her was, ooh, and this was before, not in his presence, the following day before he arrived, I said, how about we start doing this? We need to partialize his assignment so that he's not so overwhelmed, because this is not a bad thing, but you're kind of hitting him with the Tommy gun approach with all of these demands. I understand that he needs to get them done, but let's partialize that in smaller amounts. And so she's like, oh, okay. So I was like, like with one worksheet, can you split that into two so that it even looks small so that he sees more white on a page as opposed to like an entire page filled with demands that he needs to complete? And she's like, yeah. And then I had also learned too, he's not a big fan of writing. And then of course, I had to come and I'm like, is that the only mode of responding in school? And they're like, huh? I'm like, can he do multiple choice? Can he do a match, like a line across to match to the appropriate answer? Oh, can he give any oral responding? Oh, yeah. We got to give him options to provide his responses in an alternate mode, right? And I said, and another thing too, all he hears is demands throughout the day. Give him choice, right? Say, hey, these two assignments need to get done, but you can choose which one you'd like to start with first, right? Give him some control to his environment. Let him feel empowered that he's not just we're not coming down on him on all these demands, right? So again, those are what we call antecedent interventions, right? I'm going to partialize the amount of tasks that are presented to him. I'm going to give him multiple modes of responding to me, that it's not just limited to handwriting, because we already know that handwriting is very difficult for him. He finds it aversive, right? So let's give him multiple modes. Start changing the format and how you do your worksheets, right? And then, of course, too, the third one, we want to make it a positive learning environment. Give him the choice. Which one would you like to start with first, this one or this one? Those are all called antecedent interventions, because we're trying to minimize his motivation to engage in problem behavior. Okay, that's why they're very significant, and that's why it's important for us to get all of that background information when we're assessing the problem behavior.